Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's On the Fly. I'm your host, Gene DeFilippo, and my guest is the very successful and newly appointed President of Playfly Aspire, Gil Beverly. Gil, welcome to Playfly.
Thank you so much for having me, Gene. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh my goodness. You've had such wonderful experiences along the way. You've been with ESPN, you've been with Learfield, you've been in the NFL, you've been so many places. Talk about your trips from college on. Start with college and then what you did and how you got to where you are.
So my very first job out of college was working in healthcare. And yeah, and I, first of all, it was the best job that I was offered coming out of college, and it was a good job. So yeah, I mean, this is, at a time when concern around healthcare, I mean, I guess is always high, but it was really blowing up at the time. It was considered a hot field. So I was advised to go into it, and I got a great opportunity at a regional healthcare company, consulting company in Philadelphia. Did that for 2 years, realized that it was not my passion, nor was it interesting to me. Great field for the right people, but I was not the right person for that role. Decided I wanted to work in sports. I had, like, at the time, I'm in my mid 20s now, right? So what I was interested in at the time in life was, basically going out at night, dating, and sports. And the only way to make a salary out of those things, I thought, might have been sports. So that's what I pursued.
Oh, that was good thinking.
um, and at the time, I had no real understanding of how to get into the industry. And so I just went back to my alma mater at Penn, sort of networked my way to meet the marketing director of the athletic department, and just said, look, I'll volunteer, whatever you need me to do. You need me to hang signs, you need me to sweep the court, like whatever you need me to do. Once I'm done with my job at 5 or 6, I will be here, and on the weekends. And so I basically started working for him on the side. I started pitching small sponsorship deals to, like, the local restaurant scene, and running promotions during baseball and softball games, eventually football. Just kind of was scrappy and just hung out until there was finally an opportunity for a full-time job, working as the director of basketball operations for Coach Dunphy, who was a legendary coach at Penn.
Oh, love Dumpf.
Yeah, great. Oh yeah, that's right. You're a Philly guy.
My 5 years at Villanova.
Absolutely. So you can only imagine having gone to Penn, graduated, and then having the opportunity to work for Coach Dunphy. Like, I was, in hog heaven at the time. And, people always ask me, well, what did you do? What does director of basketball operations mean? And I said, whatever Coach Dunphy told me it meant on a given day.
Right.
Sometimes it meant entertaining donors. Sometimes it meant photocopying his practices. Sometimes it meant going to pick up his cleaning. Whatever it was, I did it. So did that for a couple of years. It was great. Then decided to go back to grad school. Went and got my sports marketing MBA at the University of Oregon from the Warsaw Sports Marketing Center. I was fortunate enough, an old professor at Penn introduced me to Jim Warsaw, who founded the program. And he became a really great friend and mentor to me. Rest in peace. And he shepherded me to Oregon, which is a place that, frankly, I would have struggled to find on the map at that point in my life. Now it's a second home, but had a great experience there. Had the opportunity to intern at the NFL in between my first and second year in the marketing research department. Which was a great experience because, by definition, working in marketing research, your job is to learn. And as a graduate student, like, what better opportunity than to learn about different aspects of the NFL? We supported all the different business lines, trying to figure out opportunities for revenue growth, to grow fandom, all the things. And so I really kind of came out of that with some really great experience. And, I was fortunate because so anyone who's ever lived in New York knows how expensive it is, particularly on an intern salary. So the NFL had this policy where if you stayed past 8 o'clock because you had to work late, you could expense your dinner, and you could get a free ride home. You could get car service. And so I lived in half of a shoebox, not even a shoebox, half of a shoebox apartment that I was paying through the nose. I basically was losing money. I was paying money to have this internship. So, and we didn't have good air conditioning. So I'm in my hot half a shoebox of an apartment. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to work here until they kick me out of the building so I can, because it's more comfortable. There's air conditioning. They're going to feed me. So I would just stay as long as I possibly could, work as much as possible. And I got a reputation. Wow, that intern's really serious and he really likes to work hard. I'm like, yeah, that intern doesn't want to go home. so by hook or by crook, I was able to develop a good reputation at the league, which led to me getting a full-time job upon graduation in the marketing and sponsorship department. Did that for a couple of years, oversaw some range of marketing programs, helping to drive sponsorships, a lot of stuff in the Super Bowl. At the time, it was when the NFL first launched the NFL Kickoff platform, where we're hosting really awesome concerts in New York City's Times Square, on the Washington Mall. Did some really awesome things there. And then eventually, I got advised that ESPN would be a great opportunity just because the NFL is great. But ESPN had such a breadth of operations once you introduce the media piece. And
just they had it all going. They really did.
Yeah, and it really, ESPN's still great, but this was really the golden age when, we're in 110 million homes. They own, 80% of college sports, like all the things. It was a great time to be there. And so I jumped ship from the NFL to work at ESPN, initially in the brand marketing group. So those of us that remember the classic Sports Center commercials, I was in the group that developed those. Initially, I was supporting college sports, though. And so a range of brand campaigns for college game day back in the day, the College World Series, college basketball, and really working with the Wyden and Kennedys of the world to develop really cool ad creative, which was a really neat experience. And then I ultimately was at ESPN for almost 15 years in a range of roles. One of my goals was always to sort of split the difference between marketing and sales. I think there's a false dichotomy there where if you're in sales and business development, you better be a good marketer so that you can talk, in the language of the people you're trying to sell to. Marketers Absolutely. Like talking to other marketers. They don't like being sold stuff. But on the flip side, if you're in marketing, you need to understand a revenue equation, because marketing for marketing's sake will get you fired. Whereas you got to make somebody some money at some point. So I've always tried to split the difference there. And so at ESPN, I basically climbed the ladder, going from marketing roles to sales roles, back to marketing roles, and eventually got to the point where I oversaw college sports marketing and sales, which was great.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. This was around the time that we launched the college football playoff, which, I guess it's been around now for 10 years. So it feels like it's always been here. But it was such a seismic change in college football world to develop an actual championship that was played on the field versus, having 10 different computer formulas and arguments and 2 different number ones based on the polls that you saw. So it was really revolutionary at the time. And, from an ESPN perspective, standing that up over the course of, it was about an 18-month sprint where we had to do sponsorship deals for all 6 New Year's 6 bowls plus the championship game. ESPN controls the corporate partnership program for the college football playoffs. So we ultimately did, I think, 15 official CFP partner deals. In the process, you're developing the logos for the bulls. You're developing the consumer campaign from an advertising standpoint to explain to consumers how it works, because we're very familiar with it now. But at the time, it was like, wait, what happens again? Wait, a committee's going to do this. They're going to release rankings every week. In sort of explaining all that, again, it's second hat to fans now. But at the time, it was revolutionary and different. So it was an interesting communications challenge on top of the sales piece. So it was a really awesome experience to cut my teeth there. Eventually the New York lifestyle ended up not being for me. Around the same time that my second child was born, it ended up being, that hour commute each way ended up being a little too much. And so moved to Dallas to work for Learfield. College sports is still, probably my biggest passion. Did that for a couple of years, and then was ultimately recruited to oversee marketing for the Tennessee Titans. And that grew into a overseeing marketing and sales once again. So I was the chief marketing and revenue officer for the Titans for a couple of years, or for several years. That was a great experience too, because the Titans were an under leveraged property. The brand wasn't as resonant in Nashville as it should have been or could have been. And I think over the course of a few years, we were able to really inject a lot of energy and vitality to it.
I got a master's degree and coached at the University of Tennessee.
Sure.
And so you know that Tennessee football was the thing in the state of Tennessee.
Yeah.
In Nashville, half the people were for Vanderbilt and the other half the people were for UT, but throughout the state, 90% of the people were for UT.
Yeah.
So what you did to give life to the Titans and to bring them the recognition, the marketing, the promotions that you did was terrific, because when the Philip Fulmer, who was coach at Tennessee for all those years, he and I coached together at Tennessee. We were graduate assistants, and he called me and he said, "What will it mean when the Titans come to town?" And I said, "They will be a lot bigger than you think. Pro football is the thing, and they will get their share of the market."
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, and it'd be interesting to see what would happen if both the Vols and the Titans were good at the same time, because this place does bleed orange, man. I'm not sure that the Titans can really compete with the Volunteers, because it's just such a powerful platform. Thankfully, I think there's room for everybody. When I got to the Titans, and I've become good friends with Sean Henry and other executives from the Nashville Predators. But the frustration that the Titans had at the time was we were outshone by the Nashville Predators. They were a couple of years removed from a surprise Stanley Cup experience. They were awesome at marketing and promoting themselves, and kind of drifting from that experience. And and I respect the heck out of those guys. But at the end of the day, to your point, as a professional football team, you can't be losing out in the South, in Tennessee. Right. You can't be second behind the hockey team. Now, again, I think there's space for everyone to win. There's a little bit of friendly competition there, but yeah, the job number one was to catch up and hopefully outpace the Predators before you can even think about the Volunteers. And so we just got tapped into a lot more, dynamic marketing opportunities, really tapping into what makes Nashville great. So, we had a Battle of the Bands contest where, we had a music event where we brought 4 bands together, and, the winner, as by our celebrity judges, got to play halftime at a Titans game. We had a pop-up shop where we got a lot of cool merchandise and had a party to reveal it in downtown Nashville, and sold it at cost, because we learned from our fans that they didn't like the merch we were selling in the stadium. People didn't like the food in Nissan Stadium, so we went and got 4 or 5 local merchants, including a hot chicken company, because that's what's more Nashville than hot chicken, and we got them space in the building. So, we just tried to figure out what's important to our fans, and then how do we find the connection between Nashville, the Titans, and then what's important to the fans. And we were able to do a lot of cool stuff there. And like I said, friendly competition with the Preds, I'll say that I felt like we caught up by the end of my tenure there. So that the Titans experience was good. It came to end a couple of years ago. And then about, almost a year now, I started talking to Playfly about a role, and ultimately was able to get this position as president of Playfly Aspire. I started talking to them late last summer, but I've only been in the role for 3 months. So I'm still getting up to speed, but it's been an exciting time, and I'm really looking forward to the future.
Tell our listeners out there and those that are viewing us, Aspire was purchased by Playfly about 2 years ago. What is Aspire, and what do you want to do with Aspire going forward a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road?
Yeah. So Aspire was started by Bernie Mullen and some of his partners, really pioneering stuff, however, 20 years ago. And it started as an outsourced ticketing sales agency. So as a university, athletic department, as a sports franchise, whatever the case may be, it's like, hey, we've got this great expertise on how to connect with your fans and how to sell tickets and how to price and package them in a way that'll maximize your revenue. And we can do it more efficiently than you can because of our subject matter expertise, because of our capital structure, all the things. And so you should hire us to do that. And so ultimately, they were able to build, a really solid business, small to midsize, but one that was really built on relationships and longevity with partners. And they were able to build this thing and pioneer a space that since has been entered into by multiple other players, including some of the big boys and girls from an agency perspective, and the Legends, Elevate, and others. But Aspire, the Aspire group, was really the first to get going. Um, you know, with greater competition and as the sports world becomes more sophisticated, both in terms of just commercial strategy and implementation in general, but also just the concept of ticketing products and facilities have become more complicated. We're having to adjust our approach as well. And so part of what I've been hired to do is to evolve Playfly Aspire from being an outsourced ticketing sales company to more of a premium hospitality and overall fan experience company. So whereas before it was just sort of like we were a link in the chain between the sports property, the athletic department, whatever, and the fans, like, hey, we'll take your tickets and we'll sell them. Now we're having more complex and integrated conversations with our partners in the sense of, hey, what if we, came up with some interesting premium concepts or promotional concepts that will add value to your fan experience? What if we help fund that through capital investment and became partners with you and then helped you monetize that on the back end? And what if we help you to design these experiences by bringing, top flight architects and facilities design folks to the table to help, advise and point the way on how to adjust your building to maximize your fans' utility and your fan experience, but also simultaneously driving your revenue.
Let me give you just a situation, and I'm going to make it up.
Okay.
You're working with Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt has Tennessee coming into town every other year.
Mm-hmm.
You're working with Georgia Tech, and Georgia comes to town every other year. How do you use these rivalries to help sell season tickets? I'm sure that Georgia Tech will sell more season tickets when Georgia's coming to town, because if you don't buy a season ticket, you probably can't get a ticket. So how do you raise revenues for the schools?
Yeah, I mean, that's the packaging part, right? So if you have a premier game, whether it's your direct rival, in-state rival, or in that case, you got I'm generalizing, these are all wonderful institutions, but you got the strong academic university versus the national power from a football perspective. I mean, that's obviously, those are special matchups. And what you do is, frankly, you integrate and bundle games in a way to maximize the revenue. So you might not have access to those games unless you buy a season ticket. Matter of fact, I'm friends with some folks here that are Tennessee fans that have Vandy season tickets in perpetuity just for that every other year opportunity to see the Volunteers.
That was my point.
Mm-hmm.
How can you, if you are Vanderbilt or your Louisville, or who plays Kentucky all the time, or your Georgia Tech with Georgia, can you make people buy tickets for 2 years rather than one? I mean, what do you do to raise revenue in those kinds of games?
So one of Playfly's mottos is data-driven, fan-focused. And so the best way to attack the phenomenon that you're describing is do some consumer research to find out what is the tolerance in terms of, of the spend and how price elastic or inelastic are people. So you do consumer research, whether surveying, focus groups, or whatever the case may be, and sort of say, hey, would you be willing to commit 2 years in order to get your season tickets? Yes. How about 3 years? Or what if we raise the price to this? There's multiple ways to sort of get at what consumer pricing thresholds are. And once you do that, that can help inform your packaging strategy. So, whether it's, just raising prices for a 1-year agreement, whether it's extending into a 2-year agreement, whatever the case may be. But the smart thing to do is to engage in some consumer research, talk to folks, figure out, what people are willing to do. And then you can sort of build your packaging based on that. But you absolutely, whether you're talking about the pros college, I was with the Titans, if you knew, it's a little different now, but like back in the day, it was like if the Patriots were coming to town, Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, well, guess what? Like you're going to really leverage that in terms of your mini plans. So, you can never buy that as a single game proposition. You've got to commit to 3 or 4, or whatever the case may be. You figure out what your best opportunity is, and you definitely leverage that.
Okay, so let's take again Georgia and Georgia Tech, just because that's such a big game in the state of Georgia. If you were at Georgia Tech and Georgia was coming to town, and you had some single tickets that weren't sold on a season ticket basis, what would you do with them? Would you partner them with a couple of others, say against an FCS team?
Yeah.
How would you do that to raise revenues?
So I would look at it a couple different ways. So when I was with the Titans, we had our season ticket fan group was called the 22nd Element. That's something we created. The 22nd Element happens to be titanium, so it kind of worked. And we also had a pretty good running back that wore the number 22 at the time.
Yes, you did.
so it all kind of worked out. But, for similar scenario, but for playoff games, for example, if we had leftover single game or playoff game inventory, we would give our season ticket members that were part of our fan group the first opportunity to buy that inventory at the rates that we wanted to sell them at. So that did a couple of things. One, it helped. It felt like an added benefit to the folks that were season ticket members. It drove the revenue, and it kind of kept the inventory within the family. Like those folks were less likely to sell to brokers or folks from opposing teams. So it checked a lot of boxes for us. So that's one approach. The second approach is like for Playfly, for example, we have a strategic partnership with a company called Tillion, which handles secondary market sales. So what we might do is put some of that inventory available on the secondary market where, if you only have a week to sell it, maybe you want to use dynamic pricing to figure out what will people buy, what price point will clear the market, what are people willing to spend. And then you also want to price it at a way that undercuts the brokers so that you're keeping you're maximizing your revenue and not them.
Well, Gil, you've told us about Aspire. How does Playfly's purchase of Aspire, how does that change things, for Aspire?
Yeah, it really opens up a lot of exciting opportunities. So, the conceit around Aspire initially was, again, a relationship-driven sales company that, was effectively started as a mom and pop organization that grew into a small to mid-sized business, right? And part of the reason they were able to scale was because of just the high level of service, relationship building, attention that they were able to give to their clients. And so that built trust, created value, and led to more and more relationships and drove the business. Now, with Playfly's acquisition, the goal is to maintain that sort of high level of white glove service to all of our sports property partners, university partners, and what have you. But now you're turbocharging it with resources of a multinational conglomerate that's backed by private equity. And so the resources and what you're able to do, what we talked about earlier, our ability to now invest in our partners' projects directly because we're part of a broader company, our opportunity to combine services across different areas, including naming rights, MMR rights, NIL representation, special events, you name it, media sales. So to be able to bring different competencies and services to the table, in addition to the hospitality and fan experience piece, puts us in a different space than where Aspire started.
You keep mentioning hospitality.
Yeah.
Hospitality. How does that fit in with the tickets?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. You're talking about different points in the same continuum. To me, a ticket will get you from one side of a magnetometer from security into the other side. And so now you can go watch. Period, stop. Like, you get a seat, you can watch a game. Hospitality is more about an experience. How comfortable is this seat that I'm in? What areas do I have access to that maybe a different ticket doesn't? What type of food do I get to have? What's the totality of the experience that I'm getting in addition to being able to watch a game? And increasingly, folks are demanding more of an experience behind their ticket sale or their ticket buy than just being able to watch a game. And so what we need to do is figure out what are the different types of experiences people want to have. How do we create premium opportunities at multiple price points? Because even your entry-level buyer these days, they have an expectation that they're going to get something, whether it's discounted concessions, whether it's a party deck or access to an exclusive bar. Everybody is expecting to get something above and beyond just what you used to get as a general admission ticket. And part of our strategy is to help advise our partners on how to address those needs and then ultimately create products that can help drive revenue.
Speaking of hospitality, I notice on television that many of the NFL teams and some of the college teams have built suites on the ground level. Yeah. Now, that's the worst place in the world to watch a football game. I know, because I coached and I spent couple games on the sidelines, but mostly I was up in a press box where you could see. Now, tell me about why people would want to buy a suite on the ground.
So the short answer is, different strokes for different folks. But at the end of the day, again, what you're trying to do is create a range of products to address all the demand that's out there. And what you find is there's folks that think like you and me, by the way, that a ground level suite where, there's a feeling like you're really close to the action in the terms of you can almost reach out and touch the offensive lineman that's standing there, waiting for, their next possession. And some people really value that. Like, I never understood how big these guys are. I can actually hear coach calling the plays. And that there's real value to that for some people. For folks like you who've been to a million games and, that doesn't excite you, you might be more interested in more of an elevated, higher level, meaning just literally higher up seat. So I can see
higher up and in the end zone so that
you don't have to 100%. Right. Some people feel like you. Another product that I think, which is, interesting to me that people love are bunker suites. Like you go to certain arenas for basketball and football where there are suites that don't have visibility into the game. And you're basically in this nice room in the building, but you're not actually watching the game. You're watching it on television just like you would if you were home. And it's like, why did you leave your house for that? But there's a market for it. Some people just like feeling like they're in the mix. They like feeling like they're in the.
I can see that. You can hear the crowd.
Yeah.
you can feel the emotion, you can feel the enthusiasm. I never heard of that before, but I can understand why people would enjoy that.
And so ultimately, what we have to do as a premium hospitality and fan experience company is figure out what are fans interested in a given market, and by surveying, by focus groups, whatever the case may be, and then you design products to address that. And what ultimately, what you're seeing is your legacy NFL arenas or college sports arenas or stadiums. They would have like two or three products. General admission seat. Maybe if you're lucky, you get a back in rather than a bench. There might be a club area, and then there might be some suites. So basically three baseline products. These days, you need 9, 10, 11, 12 products in order to capture what we're talking about, the different preferences and the different willingness to spend. And, so it's like everything else. People want customized experience. I want what I want, and I'm willing to pay for it. And I might be the sidelines, stare at the back of an O lineman guy. You might be a high level end zone suite guy. Whatever the case may be, you just need to have a range of product to address the range of fans that you have in your market.
Well, Gil, I'm going to tell you, you are as knowledgeable as anybody that I've been around. Playfly made a great hire, and you are going to do a tremendous job for Playfly Aspire. So thank you so much for making time to be on our program. You really, really have you've made this very interesting for all the people listening.
I appreciate it, Gene. And next time we hang out, we're going to swap some Big Five Hoops war stories.
Yes, we are, for sure. Well, we're out of time on this week's On the Fly. I'm your host, Gene DeFilippo, and I want to thank our guest, Gil Beverly, for just doing a wonderful, wonderful job talking about tickets in Playfly Aspire. So everybody out there, thanks for your time this time, and we'll see you next time.